get my 6. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Homesteading Off the Grid and another morning ramble this time. I hear you. You're like, yes, it's about time. Actually, it is. Not because these little very cold morning talks in the winter, at least, are overdue, but because this actually is a conversation about time. As of this recording, it's the day before Thanksgiving, and my beautiful bride, Dearly, aka Giggly Girl, and myself are down there at the house doing the mad dash to be prepared for upwards of 50 people to come tomorrow for this big Thanksgiving Day shindig. We always do. It's an invitation-only thing. We celebrate with people we consider to be our earth family. They are the family we have chosen to call family. Wonderful people, our best friends. So I didn't necessarily have the luxury of being able to take that time to myself today, get in my creative space and recall a time or a memory that would really generate a really good story, you know, maybe a Bigfoot Sasquatch story or something along the lines of something paranormal. So I thought I'd do a morning ramble, and I'm going to do it in regard to I'm going to dedicate it to a vertically challenged individual who lives under a bridge, for whom I prayed sincerely and then, of course, banned from the channel. I guess yesterday maybe I didn't think enough before I made a video, but I told the story about how I was actually accosted by an annoying neighbor type in front of my house after a run, just a 3-mile run. I'm still trying to allow a pulled hamstring that's maybe 90%, get the rest of the 10% up to 100% before I overextend myself. And it got, I'm not going to retell the story, but basically this man who's certainly old enough to know better called me an effing redneck, but he didn't say effing, he used the word, because I kind of blew him off. And I explained why that was. He's one of these soul-sucking vampires that comes around uninvited and wants to take up like your whole afternoon if he sees you out. And we had to kind of just start blowing him off entirely to get him to stop. And a lot of folks were like, why didn't you explain? And a long-time supportive viewer, Ellen Ross, shout out, asked me, if you're so creative, why didn't you explain to him the work you did, how you valued your time? I did. I mean, I didn't add that to the story, but it wasn't like one day we just woke up and said, okay, let's shun this guy. We made it quite clear how we valued our time, how we protected our time, and even asked, hey, we'd love you to stop and say hi anytime you come by, but if we're kind of in the middle of things, we don't really have a whole lot of time to spend with you, and we kind of need to. And then he would be like, oh, come on, you work from home, you can do that anytime you want, you can do that later. But no, he knew exactly what he was doing. He's not just some innocent old bored lonely gentleman who didn't know. But here's my point. But Ellen, here's why I like people like her. She's able to relay her views and her opinions and her thoughts and add constructive criticism or give advice without being insulting, without being derogatory. She can communicate very effectively, and I appreciate that. And even old woman down in Georgia who would hate to hear that I forgot to bring any water or coffee with me here today, Carrie D, didn't agree with how I handled the situation, and that's her right. And I like how she did not insult, call me all these terrible things and say stuff about my kid. And I just tell you, people get nasty. There's nothing wrong with disagreeing with what I say or what anybody says. It's not the message, it's how it's delivered. So these wonderful women are wonderful women. I hope they continue to remain on the channel. But the vertically challenged individual who lives under a bridge, who was banned, and of course had a fake profile, is something like OICU812. I'm like, isn't that the name of an old Van Halen album? Oh, ICU812? Something to that effect. But they were like, when was the day you determined your time was more valuable than everybody else's? I'm unsubscribing. And then they wrote like a book, and of course I didn't read that because I saw where it was going. So I humbly asked the God of my understanding, to please bless this individual with the same health, wealth, and prosperity that God has so blessed my family with. And then I banned them. So I'm coming here with this message about time. It's about time. Not to even bash that person, and not to jade, justify, argue, defend, or explain my view, but I thought, I might be able to help some people here who don't really understand the value of time and time management by kind of shedding some more light on this. I view, personally, everybody's time as being equally valuable. There's about 7.5 billion people on planet Earth right now, and I view it as if the 24 hours each of us are given is equally valuable to every individual. I in no way feel that my time is more valuable than anyone else's. What I also understand is that each and every one of us has the right to choose how we will spend those 24 hours. And what I will tell you, based upon experience, and I'm going to share some of these experiences with you, based upon years worth of training in time management and understanding the value of time, what I will tell you is that a lot of times, here's an actual statistic. Did you know that 68% of all millionaires in the United States, at least, and the percentage is probably higher if you go worldwide, 68% of all millionaires are self-made. Then the other 32% were born into wealth. A lot of times, it seems like it's our tendencies to see somebody of means and say, oh, well, they were born into the right family, or, they got an inheritance, or they won the lottery, they got lucky. No. If they are in that group, net worth, 8-digit net worth or higher, 7 digits, the odds are more likely that they created their wealth than it is that they were born into it. 2 out of 3 of them actually created it. Only 1 out of 3 was born into it. Now, how is it possible that those people were able to do that in 97% of the U.S. population never will? It has to do largely with how those people, the 3%ers, they're known as, choose to spend the 24 hours that they have in their day. I mentioned Muhammad Ali before. He's a big role model of mine. Even though he's passed on, he will live forever with what he did and the message he sent. Not just because he was a great fighter, but because he was a philosopher. And he explains it quite well. I watched a video of him not too long ago where he was talking about time, the value or the importance of valuing our time. He said, and this is an example he gives, he says, for an example, he says, I can prove that if you're 30 years old, you've only lived for 7 years. And the commentator that was interviewing him said, how can you prove that? He goes, well, think about it. If you sleep 8 hours a night, that's 1/3 of a day. You've spent 1/3 of your life asleep. So you're 30 years old, that knocks you down to 20. He says, now think about how much time you spend in school. So you're at 20 years. Well, you spend from ages 5 to 18, 13 of those 20 years, mostly in school, minus weekends, summer breaks, holiday breaks. But the majority of the time you are awake, you're in school. Now, of course, much of the time spent in school is needed, where you're actually learning, but there's a lot of wasted time. There's a lot of dead time. Transitioning to classes. If your child happens to be in a class where there's some students with behavior issues, your child's time your valuable time is being wasted while the teacher's dealing with the child that has behavior issues. I know a retired school teacher who taught for 30 years who went to listen to a woman talk about homeschooling, and he told me he was convinced that had he known back then when he started teaching what he knew today, he would have homeschooled his children, because I guess effective homeschoolers basically get as much accomplished in 2.5 hours curriculum-wise as the public schools or private schools do in their 8-hour day. And I believe it. I do believe it. We continue to public school because, number one, the school our kid goes to is like better than most expensive private schools in the country. He is in an excellent school district. It's one of the reasons we came to where we did when we moved to the U.S. from the Philippines. And then, of course, the social aspects. Okay, so that was how Ali viewed it. And then he would go on talking about how, look at how much time you spend commuting to work. And you're not getting paid for that. If you got a 40-minute drive to work, 40-minute back, I mean, that's an hour and 20 minutes a day you're losing, paying for gas. Look at the amount of time you spend opening junk mail. And I would say, in the modern world, look at how much time you waste scrolling through social media, reading stupid memes, creeping on people because you either like them or you don't like them, seeing what's going on in their life. I know people who go down that rabbit hole and lose hours a day, okay? Now, I'm going to talk about some of my personal experiences, and maybe this will help you understand why I think the way I do. It's only like 39 degrees right now, but when you're in the direct sunlight, as I am here, it's hot, so I had to shed a layer. Everybody who lives where it gets cold knows all about layering. I got more to go. I'm not going to be taking it all off, but that'll help for now. So, I mentioned before, you folks who have been here for a long time know, I spent about 8 years as a financial planner, stockbroker. That's it's a glamorous sales position. That's all it was. I was a salesman, and I just wore nice suits once I could afford to buy them. But for the first couple of years I was in that business, I couldn't afford to buy those nice suits because I wasn't making any money. I was constantly kind of on the borderline of being asked to leave the firm, before I was told to leave the firm. But they had this class called Acceleration at our home office, and they invited me to it. It was a week-long class, and it was taught by top producers, guys and girls who earn more than $1 million a year in gross production at our firm. And they told us, there were several classes. My class had maybe 10 or 12 people in it. And this is where I would meet a mentor. I talked about him. He was from Southwest Virginia, down there south of Roanoke. About 10 years older than me. He was already $1 million producer in his late 30s. He was a good old country boy, and he just knew how to talk to people. And he became my mentor. And they told us, they said, look, everybody in this class, you're still with this firm, even though your production's down, because you're good people and you possess the ability to be successful at this, but you're doing a lot of things incorrectly. And this week we want to teach you how to do them differently. And the biggest thing was really time management. And so they asked me, guys like me, girls like me, or girls in the class, they said, tell us what you do on a typical Saturday. And I told them, well, I work all week, Monday through Friday. So on a typical Saturday, spring, summer, and fall at least, I'm mowing my grass. Every 2 or 3 months, I would change the oil in my vehicle. I had a 1988 Chevy S10 Blazer. I grew up in Appalachia. I was changing oil in my motorcycles and vehicles my whole life. So I would do that, and just get caught up with odds and ends around the house. And the guy asked me, he goes, okay, why do you change the oil in your car? I'm like, well, I saved $10. You saved $10. How long does it take you to change oil in your car? I said, I can get it done in an hour or less. He goes, okay, so you view your time as being worth $10 an hour. I'm like, no, I don't know what my time's worth. And that was the key phrase right there. I didn't know what my time was worth. Well, in time I would learn. And he told me, he goes, if you're changing your own oil and if you're changing your own grass, you're stupid. Like, why? He goes, how big's your yard? And I told him, and at the time, I didn't live here. I had about maybe half an acre. I lived in a subdivision. He goes, how long does it take you to mow your grass? I'm like, I don't know. I use a push mower. It takes about an hour and a half. Okay. He goes, okay, an hour and a half to mow your grass. And it was something like an hour to change the oil in the car. So there's 2.5 hours. He says, how much would it cost you to pay somebody to mow your grass? I said, well, it's kind of pricey where I live, but still I could get it done for $50. Okay, he goes, 50, and you're saving 10 on the oil change by buying the filter and oil yourself. That's $60. Let's call it 3 hours. So your time's worth $20 an hour. And I'm thinking, that's not bad. He goes, you idiot. If you want to make $20 an hour, be a freaking teacher. He says, you're a stockbroker. And I was like, he's like, we make $200 an hour. He goes, listen, here's what you do. He goes, you pay somebody to mow your grass. You take your car to have the oil changed. And while somebody else is mowing your grass, you make calls and you sell tax-free mutual bonds. I'm like, what? And he explained it to me. He says, okay, it takes an hour and a half. How many of your clients who are high net worth retirees who have tons of money just sitting around in the bank in cash or in CDs getting 0 to 1% interest, that if you called them and offered them a 5% tax-free and insured municipal bond, would buy it. I'm like, I don't know, a couple? He goes, a couple. Okay. He goes, what if two people bought $10,000 each, 10,000 bonds? What would your commission be? Well, we got 3%. So the gross commission was $600. Our net was 40%. So 40% of 600 would have been 6 4s 32. $320. Is that right? No, 40%. 4 times 6. 240, 24, $240. He says, okay, so you're doing this stuff, mowing your grass, changing oil. Oh, and I'm not terrible at math. There's a flock of buzzards right here. You see that? I wasn't lost in deep thought of algebra. I was lost in the awe of the beauty of about 24 buzzards. So the point was, he goes, okay, so you're looking at 2.5 hours to do this stuff to save $60. Said if you paid other people to do that and you called 15 or 20 of your clients and made 2 sales, you'd make $240 every 2.5 hours. So now your time is worth $120 an hour versus $20 an hour. And it's like a light bulb went off. And man, the things I did with that information, you know what I started doing? Because I really came to know and like and respect this mentor of mine. He was like, what do you like to do? I'm like, I love to fish. And here's one of the things I used to do, because my heart was really never in that business. The idea of just making money for the purposes of making money does nothing for me. But if I'm allowed to make money doing something I love, something I'm passionate about, like writing stories, like telling stories, like maybe sharing experiences like this with people who might benefit from the information that I garnered through experience, that's valuable to me. That's worthy. That's what I'd rather do. And I am so grateful that I can do that today, and I get paid for this, because they say when you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. I haven't worked in a decade, even though I put in the hours every day, but it's doing stuff I absolutely love. So he found out I liked fishing, and one of the things I would do to motivate myself, because I'd progressed to a point to where it was my goal to gross $1,000 a day in gross commissions, which would have been $400 a day in net commissions, because that works out if you work 5 days a week, $100,000 a year. And that was like the next pinnacle we were trying to get to. And he says, so I would take my kayak and my fishing gear to work with me, and I would park right outside my office. So when I was making my phone calls, because by this time in my career, I wasn't knocking on doors anymore. I'd gone through enough of that, getting my butt chewed out and handed to me by a bunch of highfalutin, pretentious snobs, making fun of my accent and all that. But I'd gotten enough customers and clients through that to where I was now getting referrals, word of mouth, repeat business. I didn't need to cold call anymore. So I would just call people on the phone. If I knew, high net worth retirees, always looking for a good rate on a tax-free bond. If we got one in inventory, we got the notification, hey, you guys in Virginia, we just bought $10 million worth of this airport bond. They're doing renovations on the strip in Richmond International Airport. I'd call these people. So as soon as I hit my nut of 1,000 gross a day, I would go get in my car and I would go fishing. And my firm didn't have a problem with that, because all they cared about was the numbers. And this is what a lot of folks don't understand. There's a difference between being busy and being productive. What good is it to sit in my office for 8 hours a day, all day, and file papers and reorganize the furniture and do all this stuff that keeps me busy, but at the end of the day doesn't net any production? And that's what I did my first 2 years in the business. And of course, I'd make my phone calls off and on. I'd get rejected. I'd feel down. So I'd go clean the bathroom. Seriously. I couldn't understand why I was spending 8 to 10 hours a day in my office, but I wasn't producing the numbers I was expected to produce. The answer was because I was busy as hell, but I wasn't productive at all. So my mentor told me, he said, that's a great idea, that thing you're doing where you're, and I would, by noon, I would be there. I got into the office at 8, even though the market didn't open till 9:30. I wanted to have my calls prepared, who I was going to call once the market did open, and be ready for it. He said, I got an even better idea for you. Even though you're coming in, you're only spending 4 hours a day in the office, you're getting out by noon and going fishing, that's great. He says, I want to tell you a way you can fish all day if you want to, minus maybe an hour. I'm like, do tell. He goes, go into your office, find an inventory of a bond, we've got plenty of. And then he said, print off a call list. Get your clients and customers' numbers. This was in the early days of cell phones. This was like 2000, 2001, or 2003 maybe. I had a flip phone. He said, print off the names and phone numbers, then go fishing. calling from the riverbank. I was like, that's genius. And I would do that. I would be sitting there fishing, and I'd make phone calls from this list. And if somebody said, yeah, I'll take 10 bond, which is 10,000, I said, okay, I'm going to call the office and have, my assistant put the order in for you. The office, where are you? You got a doctor's appointment or something? Did you stay? I'm like, nah, I'm fishing. And I never hid it from my customers. And one of the reasons they like to do business with me is because they told me I was real. They says, you're not highfalutin, you don't put on airs, just a good old boy from West by God, Virginia, and we like you, So that became how I rolled. So there's some examples, but I've got another one for you. I would leave that industry after realizing it just wasn't for me. My soul wasn't in it. And I went into the military in my mid-30s. And before I shipped to basic training down in Fort Benning, Georgia, because I was an infantryman, and that's the home of the infantry, we had to spend about a week pre-mobbing at Fort Lee, Virginia, down close to Hopewell. And this is where we kind of we became even more prepared for what we were going to experience at basic training. And so our last day there was a Saturday, I believe, our last full day there, and then we flew out on Sunday, I think it was. So our instructor, I think he was an E7, had been in the active Army for, I think he did 20 years, and he went Virginia Army National Guard after that to continue to do his part. He still wanted to serve, but he didn't want to do it full time. He was training us. He woke us up at 4 o'clock in the morning one morning that last day, and he told us the day before, because we were getting up at 5, because that's what time we'd get up at basic training. He said, we're getting you up at 4 tomorrow because we got something special to do. So he got us up at 4, our platoon, maybe there was a couple dozen of us. We went out in the dark. It was still summer, but it was still dark. It doesn't get daylight till about 5 here in Virginia in the middle of summer. And he just had us marching in formation, singing cadences. And he said, look, he says, you see that house up there? And he pointed up to this big house that was on post. He said, the command sergeant major of this post lives in that house. Now, for those of you who don't know this about the military, command sergeant major is the highest rank you can get in the enlisted ranks. He or she is the highest. They're in charge of all the enlisted personnel on that post, okay? All of Fort Lee. So he says, the command sergeant major lives right there. Today's Saturday. Nobody has to go to formation or have duty on Saturday, so it's his day off. He says, I want to tick this guy off. I want you guys singing these cadences and calling out, your moves while we're learning all these different, what do they call it? DNC, duress and whatever. PNC, whatever. It's nice that I've forgotten some of this stuff. Drill and ceremony, DNC. Scream it out at the top of your lungs. We're going to wake this guy up. It's his day off. So we were screaming, we were yelling, we were being loud. And at 4:30, his lights came on. And the sergeant first class says, yeah, we got him. His lights are on. Look at this. We're all clapping. And we all yell, good morning, Command Sergeant Major. He goes, all right. He goes, I'm going to be honest with you people. He says, I was trying to teach you a lesson here. He says, do you think you really woke up the Command Sergeant Major? And we were like, of course, Sergeant. Yes, we did. He goes, no, you didn't. He says, that man gets up at 4:30 in the morning every day, all year, whether he's got duty or not, whether it's Christmas morning, whether it's New Year's, even if he's on leave and he's at Myrtle Beach on vacation. He gets up at 4:30 in the morning every morning. Now, why is it that you think that is? Well, all of us answered the obvious answer. Well, because he's a Command Sergeant Major. And the Sergeant First Class said, no. He said, you've got it backwards. He said, that man is the Command Sergeant Major because he gets up at 4:30 every morning, even when he doesn't have to. And he is the most productive human being you'll ever meet in your life. And the guy told me, he said, Lake, if he'd have gone into your business, he'd been $1 million producer at any firm he went to. And after I did my stint in the military, I'm convinced it's true. Because I learned about time management in business. But then I learned about just how many hours are in a 24-hour day in the military. And I'll tell you this, because for the next 6 years that I was in the military, I was not allowed to waste that time. And much of that time I went on 4 hours of sleep. And the whole time I was kicking myself in the butt for this reason. When I went to college, It took me 6 years to graduate and get my bachelor's degree. Sure, I could say they're reasons, but they're really excuses. I had to work a lot of times in college to have money to go. I did run track and cross country. I got scholarships, so my training took up a lot of my time. But I partied a lot. I skipped classes. I knew nothing about time management. And after I completed basic training, I started telling myself, gosh, if I would have gone into the military for 4 years and then gone to college, I would have probably graduated college in 3 years instead of 4, definitely not 6. And I like, his name's eluding me right now, of course, because I'm talking about it, but the guy that wrote that book, Hillbilly Elegy, he didn't know what he wanted to do really when he was 18. He didn't feel as if he was college material, but he knew he wanted to get out of Appalachia. So he went into the Marine Corps and he did a tour in Iraq, as I did. And then when he got back, he went to college. He went to Ohio State because he was from Ohio, and he graduated in 3 years because the Marine Corps taught him how to manage his time and use it effectively and use it wisely. He then went on to law school at Harvard, and today he's a lawyer, and he wrote a best-selling nonfiction book that's been turned into a Showtime movie. I don't like to give advice a lot of times, but I know there's a lot of young men in our society right now who are not really sure what to do because the days of really needing a college degree are behind us. I mean, because of social media largely, because of trade schools. A lot of jobs that existed 20 years ago just don't exist today. So they've chosen not really to go to college. Maybe they're working a job somewhere. Maybe they're not. Maybe they're trying to figure it out. My advice, based upon experience, would be, hey, if you're not sure, go down and sign up to join the Army for 4 years, or the Marines, or the Navy, or the Air Force, or the Coast Guard. Go into the military for 4 years. You will learn about time management in such a way you never will at college anyway. And if nothing else, you'll know what it's like to be a man or a woman when you come out. Yeah, so it's advice freely given. It's advice that can be freely rejected. But my point of all this is, through experience, I've learned to value my time. Through experience, I've learned to choose wisely how to use it. Through experience, I've learned the big, huge, major difference between being busy, which is something I avoid doing, and being productive, which is something I thrive for. Because if I'm productive, I don't have to put in more than just a couple of hours a day, really. This morning, I wrote 3,500 words. Took me about 2 hours, and you'll be happy to know it's for the upcoming release of Bigfoot Sasquatch Files Volume 12. We're very close. We're very close. Now I've spent almost half an hour making my video. It'll take forever to upload because we have terrible internet out here. Good news on that. Next spring, we're going to have high speed, so I can get rid of this 360 stuff. But we're looking at 3 hours max today. I'll work. Those 3 hours were extremely productive, so I don't have to waste another 5 like most people being busy. The next 5, I'm going to spend with my wife. I'm going to spend with my kid. I'm going to spend doing the things we love to do, the things that make us tick. And I will very aggressively guard that time from people who feel they have the right to waste it. You know, why do I think my time is more valuable than others? Because I don't tolerate people showing up 2 hours late. If they say they're going to be here at 1 and don't come till 3, I give them a couple chances if they're friends, but after that, I just stop inviting them. It's not that I view my time as being more important than those people who are habitually late. It's just I know how valuable my time is, so I make the choice not to let other people waste it. If I don't waste my own time, why would I let anyone else waste it? And I'll end with this. I'm going to use 2 men in this example because it's a good example. It doesn't mean I like either of them. It doesn't mean I hate either of them. But I remember when George W. Bush first came into office, in his first few months, a reporter asked him during a press conference, they said, you know, one of the things that we do like about you, President Bush, because the media, you know, doesn't really like the particular party he represented, said, is that you're always on time. You're always prompt. He said, your predecessor, which of course was Bill Clinton, always left us waiting. I mean, we'd have a press conference at this time. We'd be here early, cameras and lights set up, and he was always 30 minutes late. And they asked President Bush, what do you have to say about that? And he didn't bash President Clinton, didn't say anything about him. He said, look, he says, I have too much respect for other people's time to be late. Next question. Went on to the next question, and he really summed it up. It's not about him So the person that's habitually late, it's not about them and it's not about me cutting slack. It's about them proving they don't respect other people's time. Well, I do respect my time, and if others don't, I'm going to make sure they don't waste it because I actively make sure I don't waste my time myself. So I hope this helps somebody. And if you disagree, tell me, let me know. I'm not going to pray for you and ban you just because we're of different views. It's when you start the insults. Come on, really? That's like seeing a guy running outside in front of his house and deciding to call him an effing redneck because he won't spend the next 2 hours entertaining you because you're bored. It's the same level, okay? Hope you enjoyed this very long-winded morning ramble. I know, it's about time, literally. See you for more next time.